The Washington Capitals are the first team to clinch a playoff spot this season. The Islanders and Habs don't do each other any favors in their battle for playoff spots, plus more expansion talk, all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. You can find us for free over on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts. So subscribe, you'll get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. How are we doing today, Gil?
We're doing all right. It's spring, and that means playoffs are just around the corner. I'm excited about that. And the playoff races in both conferences are heating up. And we actually had first team in the NHL, clinch a playoff berth last night.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was the Washington Capitals who did so against my Philadelphia Flyers. It's okay. The Flyers actually had a good effort in that game. We'll talk about it. But first, here's Dan from Locked On Caps with his take on their team making the playoffs.
The Capitals are the first team to clinch a playoff spot. Hi, this is Dan Holme of Locked On Capitals. Well, a lot of excitement surrounds the Capitals as they are the first team to clinch a playoff spot. And what a difference a year makes. Last season, the Capitals were the last team to qualify for a playoff spot. This season, the first, putting up 100 points already on this season. And just looking back on this season already, it's the things that were done in the offseason. The masterclass by former GM Brian McClellan bringing in Pierre-Luc Dubois, which was met with a lot of skepticism. Logan Thompson, Jacob Chikrin, Duhaime, Radish, and the younger players stepping forward. A great moment for the Capitals. And let's be clear here, very little insiders said the Capitals were going to do anything this year. I love how the Capitals are proving the critics wrong. I'll have much more on this for you later on Locked On Caps.
So, yeah, I have a bone to pick with what Dan just had to say.
Okay, go ahead.
I will say that, sure, nobody predicted that the Caps would do this well before the season started. Like, that is 100% true. But like a third of the way into the season, everybody was like, oh yeah, the Caps are good. And they've continued to be good. Like nobody has criticized them or say they're playing outside their depth right now. Like this is what this team is this year and they're good and that's fine. But like they're not some underdog team, who's a Cinderella story here. They've been good all season long.
And maybe that's the proof of how good they actually are. Because sometimes you get those Cinderella teams, they surprise everybody in October and November, and then boom, the bottom falls out. They go back to the mean. The Capitals surprised everybody in October and November, and they're still tied for the most points in the league and become the first team to clinch a playoff berth. So yeah, they're not surprising anyone anymore, except for the fact that they started off really good. That was a surprise, but then they stayed really good.
Yeah. And, I don't know. Is that a surprise? Maybe, maybe not. But to me, the Cinderella story or the potential Cinderella story in the division, at least, would be Columbus, right?
Well, that's a whole different animal. Yeah.
Right? Like if they end up making the playoffs, that would be the Cinderella story or like the underdog kind of story. But there's nobody like it, especially with the Ovechkin story. Nobody is saying, oh, like, the Caps are just inching along, making this great run. No, they've been at the
they're
top
blowing people out of the water.
I know. And they played fine last night against the Flyers, but the Flyers, they were up 3-0 on the Flyers and the Flyers got 2 goals back. So, after 2 successful coaches challenge, might I add, John Tortorella, master at those, master. But the Caps looked fine and they won. So that was they did what they had to do. It was fine.
Look, they're 46, 15, and 8. I mean, you got to give them credit for that.
No, 100%. That's what I'm saying. They're a good team. They find ways to win, and and they did. But it's just like, I don't know. That's just my little
and
peeve there.
No, I hear you. And how about this for symmetry though? The grade 8 scores goal 888, which pulls him to within 7 goals of Wayne Gretzky's NHL record. But
sure,
Ovechkin. I mean, it looks more and more like he's actually going to get it done this year.
Yeah, my favorite part of the game last night, honestly, was in the waning moments of the game. The Flyers had a 6-on-5, and literally, I really think they were trying to prevent him scoring an empty net goal more than they were trying to score a goal themselves. And it worked out fine. So he just scored the 1 goal early in the game, which was 5-on-5, which is legit, and I'm cool with that.
Right, right. Would you feel disappointed in some way or cheated if the record-breaking goal is an empty net goal?
I don't care either way, honestly. Okay. I don't care enough about this record to have an opinion on that.
Wow.
So, we've talked about that on this show.
Yes, we have. But I mean,
he's scored enough empty net goals that the sum, as part of this, that the sum total of it is already tainted by that. So the final goal being an empty netter or, it bouncing off his leg or something into the net, how would that be any different than a whole bunch of the other goals he scored?
I mean, look, empty net goals count just the same. What's the cliche in hockey? They don't ask how, they just ask how many. So, it counts just the same. But I want to see.
Yeah, I have beef with how the NHL counts goals in general. So I can't really put the blame on Ovechkin for the fact that he's just living in the world of the NHL and how they count goals. My problem is with the league. It's not him.
Right. Right. No, I hear you. I mean, you want, if you were going for a poetic justice moment, it's on the power play. It's a one-timer from his favorite spot.
The dot. Sure.
That's what you want to see as a fan.
Yeah.
That's the fitting, air quotes, way for him to break the record. It'll probably be an empty net goal. Just saying. But,
great. Happy for him.
And Wayne Gretzky and Gordie Howe both spent a lot of time in the WHA as well, and those goals don't count toward the total, so that's a whole different issue. But
for sure,
still can't take anything away from Ovechkin at this point.
No, but I do want to give some credit to the other Washington Capitals. That's the thing that kind of also bugs me about this whole Ovi thing is I feel like in some ways it's overshadowing what some of the other Washington Capitals have accomplished this season. You look at Tom Wilson, he's having a remarkable season. You look at Lindgren, what a performance that he's been able to put on. And he is in some ways carrying this team in a lot of ways. And I just feel like Connor McMichael has become an incredible hockey player. And I just wish that outside of the DC market, these guys were getting more attention by the NHL zeitgeist.
Yeah, Ovi does kind of hog the headlines, not through anything that he does or doesn't do, just because, that's how the media is going to cover it. But you look at this team, they already have 2 30-goal scorers. You got Protas with 29. They lead the league in goals scored.
Oh, yeah, Protas will hit 30.
He'll hit 30, unless he gets injured, knock wood, then he'll hit 30. They're first in the league in goals scored and 3rd in the league in goals against. I mean, it's hard to beat that when you break it down.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just justice for everybody else on the Caps, man. That's all I got.
Yeah, no, and Pierre-Luc Dubois, did anyone predict he would have 60 points in 69 games?
Yeah, that's the one thing Dan did say in his clip that I was glad he brought up, because Pierre-Luc Dubois has been a huge part of that team's success this year, and he does deserve the praise, and the team does deserve the accolades for bringing him in.
Yeah, they really had a great offseason, and it made a big difference. I mean, talk about retooling on the fly. They went from a team that kind of backed into the playoffs last year to a team that is dominating this year. So kudos to the Caps.
Yeah, they have an incredible prospect pool too. So
yes,
their future is looking very bright, and they have the potential for sustained success, which is the key here. And I think that is a very impressive thing to do. And we'll see if they can continue that in the playoffs and where the seeding comes out and who they'll be matched up against. But there are many other teams vying for that second wild card spot. And one of them is your New York Islanders. They face the Montreal Canadiens. We're going to talk about that game and the implications and all the branches off of that coming up next.
Did you know getting a good night's sleep is the #1 recipe for long-term success in life? I didn't. It took me way longer to realize than I'd like to admit. It was years of tossing and turning. I was always tired. I never felt like I could live up to my potential, but not anymore. Thanks to Bear Mattress. I used their sleep quiz and I matched with the Elite Hybrid. It's perfect for side sleepers like me. Now I wake up energized. I'm getting deeper sleeps and I'm ready to attack the day. No matter how you sleep, Bear Mattress has a match for you with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout for 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
So, Gil, your New York Islanders won against the Montreal Canadiens in overtime last night in what was really unfortunate for both teams, I think, in that it turned into a 3-point game when these two teams are literally neck and neck battling each other for the wild card spot. How did it feel to get the win for the Isles, but also know that the Habs got a point?
Yeah, it was certainly disappointing when you're up 3-1 early in the third period at home to see that lead slip away. And it was a really bad turnover that led to the breakaway goal that tied the game. But it was vital for the Islanders to get the 2 points. When you came in 3 points behind the Habs, you lose in regulation. I think the Islanders would have been done. You win in regulation, you're right behind them. But winning in overtime, you know, they couldn't afford to lose that game. They needed the 2 points. So disappointed that you gave Montreal, or that Montreal earned 1 point, but you needed the 2 and you got it. So you're still alive. And I think that's the bottom line.
Right. And it's just really, I think, fascinating here. And I feel like this battle is going to go to the bitter end of the season here with, you know, the Senators are a little bit higher than these other teams, but with the Habs getting that 1 point, it still puts them within striking distance of that first wild card spot. But you have the Rangers, the Islanders, the Blue Jackets, and I would say the Red Wings, maybe, although they've had a bit of a up and down recently. The Blue Jackets have lost 4 in a row. The Rangers have lost 2 in a row. So it feels like the Habs and the Islanders were the two teams that were still like, no, we still want this, right?
Yeah, I mean, Ottawa's played well lately, although they've now lost a couple. But
Yeah.
Montreal 6-1-3 in their last 10. The Islanders 6-3-1, and all the other teams seem to be just struggling right now. And unfortunately, you know, there are going to be 2 wildcard teams from the East, but at least one of them, if not both of them, are kind of stumbling in to this final spot.
Yeah, which after everything sounds just the opposite of what we thought might happen, right?
Nobody is really pulling away. It's like, who's going to be the best of this mediocre bunch? Now, for teams like Ottawa, Montreal, Columbus, Detroit, teams that haven't been to the playoffs a lot recently, I don't think they care about style points. They just want to get in. and break the long slump that they've had of missing Stanley Cup playoff hockey. But realistically speaking, none of these teams seem to be consistent. And that's really their big issue. They're capable on any given night of playing really, really good hockey. And then they're capable of just, falling apart and looking really bad for games at a stretch.
Yeah. And obviously present company, excluded here in terms of wishing good versus bad from that game last night. But man, when Brendan Gallagher tied it up, and it was an emotional moment, and you just felt like maybe the Habs were going to win on that momentum alone, and then they didn't.
Yeah.
That was just uncool of the Islanders, I gotta say.
Sorry to spoil everybody's fun, but
I mean, it's not fun. It was just the situation is not fun, but it was just very heartwarming, as sports stories go.
It was a good third period comeback for the Canadiens. As frustrating as it was for Islander fans to see the 3-1 lead evaporate. But look, I give a lot of credit to Montreal. I don't think a lot of people expected them to be where they are right now. And they have a lot of speed and energy, and I like the way they play the game.
Yeah, and Lane Hudson has had a tremendous season and has been a huge, huge part of that. And you look at Montreal, and to your point, they're obviously one of the teams that has not made the playoffs in 3 years. But the last time they did, they got to the Stanley Cup Finals,
right,
and lost. So it's been a very weird few years for them to go from the finals to not making the playoffs and then being in this sort of 3-year rebuild situation. And so a very good for maybe this time around, they want to take it step by step to get to a true Stanley Cup run here.
Yeah. And obviously the first step is to get in. So, and we may see all 7 Canadian teams make the playoffs this year. They're all in the picture.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because the Islanders' next opponent is the Calgary Flames, who are in their own battle.
Yes.
To try and get into the playoffs on the Western Conference side of things. So, just a very innocent Islanders Flames game is going to have huge implications for both teams, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Flames right now, as we record this, they're 2 points out of a playoff spot with 2 games in hand on St. Louis. And, it is just all of a sudden right now, you got 4 teams in the West battling for that second wild card spot. And I mean, Minnesota has a little bit of a cushion, but they're not home free in that first wild card spot, especially with all the injuries they're dealing with.
Yeah. So, and the Canucks are just so spotty these days.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to predict what they're going to do, but you look at, the Wild have definitely separated themselves out a little bit in that first wild card spot. But I think that it's going to be a real tough road, I think, for any of these teams that are on the outside looking in right now. And with the Flames, I just think the opportunity is so huge. And of course, they've been doing so on the back of potential Calder winner Dustin Wolf in net for them, who's put on a tremendous performance this season.
He has been spectacular. And look, you look at the numbers, the underlying numbers for the Calgary Flames. They are next to last in the league in goals scored, and they're still in the fight for a playoff spot. So that has to tell you everything you need to know about how important Dustin Wolf has been to this team being where they are right now.
Yeah, I think so. It's really, really cool, honestly, to see what that team has been able to accomplish, with a tremendous goaltender like that. Now, of course, Utah is still in it. right behind Calgary right now. They won their last game, and I think that's basically where the line is, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Anaheim right now is 9 points back. That's
right.
And to make up 9 points and jump 4 other teams is going to be really hard.
Right. And so I think, this weekend of games overall is going to have some huge implications, but that Isles Flames matchup, I think, is definitely one to keep an eye on. The Blues are facing the Blackhawks. That's a rivalry game that will have big meaning for the St. Louis Blues. And then I think just from a fun perspective, we talked about the Caps clinching the playoffs, but they're facing last year's Stanley Cup champion, the Florida Panthers, as well. So it'll be a good Saturday of games with big implications here.
Looking forward to another great weekend of hockey action. No question about it.
Yeah, and the Montreal Canadiens are going to be hosting the Colorado Avalanche, who just had a big win as well. So that is going to be a fun game, and like each and every game gets more and more important as we get to season's end. So looking forward to all of that. In the meantime, the expansion talk monster has reared its head again. I feel like it's the Loch Ness monster of the NHL, but we got to talk about it because a potential new owner has come into play, and we are going to do that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late to watch the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. I've been staying up late watching all the tournament action and hockey action, and 5 Hour Energy helps keep me up the next day. With longer days, I love getting outside for a hike or a run. Tropical Burst is my go-to for a quick boost. So head on over to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack and have it delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up and stay energized.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown. Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup. Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free. It's your team every day.
So new reports have come out via Kevin Weeks at ESPN, who was talking about a specific ownership group that could potentially be in Houston. And Houston's a city that has been talked about over the years as a potential expansion market. But when you have a specific ownership group that has now met with the league, it takes it a step further.
It does. And look, I think there are some real good reasons why Houston would make sense. It is the largest market in the United States right now without a hockey team. You have a natural rivalry built in with Dallas. And I just think that you also have a history of minor league hockey and WHA hockey in Houston. So I think there are some really good possibilities there. I know when the North Stars moved to Dallas, a lot of people were skeptical. That franchise has thrived in Texas, and I think Houston could as well.
Yeah, and this group is the Freaking Group, which is a Houston-based company. So there's something to that, despite the fact that, they have some ownership in other sports organizations, around the world. They own part of a Serie A team. They are majority owners of Everton in Premier League. And so, they're not new to the sports game here, but the fact that they have those local ties is something that is going to be appealing to the NHL. Like, Bettman loves that stuff.
Yeah, no question about it. And then there has also been some talk about giving Atlanta a third shot at an NHL franchise, and New Orleans' name has come up as well.
Yeah, that was about a month ago. Another Kevin Weeks report that there was a group in New Orleans that had been discussing a potential expansion team. Now, of course, Gary Bettman always plays it coy and says, "Oh no, we're not expanding. We're not going to do that yet. We're always taking meetings, but we're not talking about expanding." Meanwhile, you get all these like backdoor piece of information come out to say, oh, it could be 4 more teams, not just 2 teams, which I think would be madness in terms of dilution of the talent pool. But
yeah, I think there are already too many teams, to be honest with you, as far as, what we saw at 4 Nations shows you how good the quality of hockey could be with fewer teams. But the other thing I have to say is if we get even just 2 more teams, I know they will have a play-in round in the playoffs going forward. Yep. They may have that even if they don't expand. But, are we really going to get to the point where the season is going to start in early October and the Stanley Cup is going to be awarded in the middle of July? Is it going to come to that with 84 games and an extra play-in round of playoffs?
Well, they added play-in stuff to March Madness, speaking of what's happening right now.
And the NBA, and
Yeah. So I do expect the NHL to have a play-in round at some point, but I would certainly hope that expansion does not go too far. I just think, it's just bad for the league overall in terms of what the bang for your buck that you're getting in quality of regular season. Now, the only way to me that the dilution effect of the skill doesn't affect it is if the sport can do a better job of developing players in more places around the world. I think that's part of it too, right? If you get, stronger hockey development programs in non-traditional countries, and eventually you have a bigger pool of hockey players to draw from, and there's more parity on the international level, that's where NHL expansion can be a useful thing.
Yeah, and if you think about it, they've already done that to a large extent where you had, in the days of the original 6, the NHL was 98% Canadian. So that was your entire pool. Right. Then you got some Americans. Then you get into the 70s and the Swedes start coming over. And you get into the 80s and the Russians start coming over. And then the Slovaks and the Czechs and all these other countries start adding players to the talent pool. But you still need to be able to sustain additional roster spots and player jobs. So it would help if they could increase that talent pool.
Right. And that takes a long time. So I certainly don't expect there to be more than 2 expansion teams over the next decade. It just would not make sense to me to go beyond that.
No, it wouldn't.
Money is very tempting for this owner, for the owners.
That's always the bottom line. Always.
Right. Just the expansion fees alone, but you got to think about the product here.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know. We'll see. You talked about the schedule a little bit. We've already talked about the fact that there's a potential 84 game schedule out there. Pierre LeBrun had an article about that recently, and for it to go even more than that because of expansion, I don't necessarily like it.
No, and then how many times, they've also talked about possibly not having every team play every team home and road each year. I get that. I prefer rivalry games to a point, but you still want to see, if you're from the Eastern Conference, you still want to see Connor McDavid every year or have a chance to see him in person every year. So, or to see Alex Ovechkin if you're in the West. So I get it, but sometimes too much is not a good thing.
I hear you. All right, that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening and watching over on YouTube. I will be back tomorrow with Erica El Ayala for our women's hockey report. Gil will be back on Monday talking to hosts from around the Locked On NHL channel to talk about the latest with their teams. And you can catch Locked On Fantasy Hockey as well to get all your fantasy hockey news on that show anywhere you listen to podcasts. Have a great weekend, everyone.